I'm Birds 365, joined by our good buddy Paul Domowitch from the 3013, JAKIBSports.com, Eagles beat writer forever. Domo, here's where I want to start today. John and I were just debating running backs, and I surely want to get you in that conversational mix. But first things first, will you at some time in your duties as the Hall of Fame presenter from Philadelphia have to make a case for Deshaun Jackson 5 years from now?
No.
Not even going to have to make the speech and be taught. Yeah, Damo, you can sit down.
I mean, he's never going to make the the final 15, which is, and I would never, honestly. I mean, there's guys that I've never made, Eagles that never made the top 15, the final 15. That early on in the process, I sent letters out, and because I believed they belonged, deserved at least consideration. I mean, I read Ed's piece. Deshaun doesn't deserve consideration for the Hall of Fame. He was a very good player. Period. End. Stop. Nothing more.
It's not the Hall of Very Good, but I think people latch on to, one thing. He's got the most 60-yard receptions of all time. All right, he can run. I mean, nobody's denying that. He was a tremendous deep ball receiver, but it's more than that. It's being and he's a very good player. But boy, I'm amazed at some of the Hall of Fame questions we get, Damo. I'm amazed.
Yeah, and the thing about wide receiver is there's a real backlog right now of guys that deserve to be in.
Oh yeah,
we haven't gotten Torrey Holt, Reggie Wayne, the former Texans guy, Andre Johnson, although he's only in the second year of eligibility. Hines Ward. I mean, I can go on and on a list of guys who are, were much more productive than Deshaun. Maybe didn't have the vertical, weren't the vertical threat that he was. But again, like you said, that's one aspect. You've got to be productive to get into the Hall of Fame.
All right, so, and I don't want to get bogged down by Hall of Fame, but I'm intrigued by this. The first grouping that gets considered either by vote or by conversation, whatever, what's the largest group of someone that at least is in the process of a Hall of Famer, and how is that list put together?
I'm sorry, say that. I didn't quite understand what you meant, Jody.
How does someone become a Hall of Famer? Where does the process start that they are on a group that gets trimmed down and then gets voted on? What is the largest group that a player starts in consideration for the Hall of Fame?
Well, I mean, you have the total number of players who are eligible. Generally, it's somewhere around 130, maybe, because guys who don't get any votes in a year kind of are suddenly are not on the list. So we have a vote in September, sometime in September, that reduces that number, where we've got to come up with a list of 25. I mean, each voter has to, and they calculate that and have 25 semifinalists.
What gets you on? Sorry to interrupt, Dom. What gets you on eligibility? Because I know baseball. I should know football. I don't. I'm assuming you do. Baseball is you got to play 10 years minimum in the league. If you do, then you're on the Hall of Fame ballot. If you don't get 5%, you're gone forever and you're never back on again. What gets you on the original list to be considered a potential Hall of Famer?
I don't know if there's a minimum on years played because, I mean, if you've only played 1 or 2 years, you're not going to be seriously considered anyway. But you've got to wait 5.
Tough, because you have the Gale Sayers of the world, and
mean,
guys who don't have longevity but are tremendous impacts on the game because of the injury aspect of it. Whereas,
right,
yeah,
I mean, we've had discussions over the Broncos running back
Terrell Davis.
We had the long, hard discussions over the Tony Baselli. Finally got in after years of arguing back and forth about whether he had played long enough. But there is no official line as far as how many years you have.
Who puts out the original list, the first that you vote on to decrease down to the 25?
The league or the Hall of Fame. I mean, it's basically everybody who's eligible at that point. I mean, if you've played in the league 5 years,
Five is
I mean,
the
if
minimum. Okay.
you played and you retired 5 years, suddenly, there'll be a list with your name on it, which gives us the opportunity to vote for. And we take, we're supposed to take 25 names out of that pool and put together a list of semifinalists. Eric Allen's been on that list of 25 semifinalists for the last 3-4 years. After that, we have a vote in December. Take that official list of 25 and pare it down to 15 finalists. So, and then in January, we find out who the 15 finalists are. Then we discuss them at length before the Super Bowl. This year, I think it's going to be mid-January. They've changed up the whole process. We're going to have a meeting. They prefer to have, it used to be with I think you guys remember the day before the Super Bowl was when the voting was.
Oh yeah.
COVID changed that for 2 years. We had remote calls in January. Now they have the announcement of the Hall of Fame on Wednesday or Thursday, whenever that that honors show is. So basically, they want us to make a decision earlier. So our vote will be sometime in mid-January at a remote, at a location somewhere. I don't even know if they picked it yet. So anyway, when we have the 15 names plus the veterans that are nominated by the senior committee, plus one or two, however many coach/contributor nominees there are that year, and then we go into a room and discuss them for about 8 hours and vote and reduce the number and eventually come out with a maximum of 5 Hall of Fame modern era players plus the seniors and contributor/coach.
So you don't think Deshaun's even going to make the list of 25, the first cut down?
Hey, more power to him. I just don't see it happening. No.
Okay.
When I see guys that haven't made it, Seth Joyner's never been on the list to 25, which
Asante Samuel. Where's Damo? Asante was popping up.
He blames me, but but yeah. So I just don't see him as a Hall of Famer. I haven't thought about whether he'd make it to the final to 25. I just think, as John said, he belongs in the Hall of Very, Very Good. He's not a Hall of Famer, that's not a bad thing.
It's not a slight. People think it's a slight.
In the NFL and had his career.
You guys at the 33rd team, you were a part of it. A bunch of guys who were Hall of Fame selectors talking about current players, putting them in categories, locks, and there's some heat in Philadelphia as usual because you had Jason Kelsey in I believe the likely category. I forget the exact terminology, but I think people don't understand how difficult it is, particularly for certain positions. Center has been one of them, for them to get in the Hall of Fame. And I think ultimately Jason's going to be a Hall of Famer, but it's not going to be smack dab, no doubt about it, first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
There's going to be some angst, at least from the fan base. I think everybody knows he's ultimately going to get in, but I think it's going to be more difficult than people realize.
What people don't seem to realize is, every year when we vote on the final 15, I would say a minimum of 12 are guys that you look at and say they should be in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
12 out of 15. We can only put in 5. So, that just naturally creates a backlog of deserving players. And so that's why the whole first ballot thing is kind of absurd in football, because it's a different structure than baseball is, where
But if you do get in the first ballot because of the way the voting and the results have gone, that's pretty damn big honor. If you make it on your first time in, because you guys have been tough and you're held down by the numbers and positional comparisons and everything else, it has become what it's become. You get in on that first ballot, damn, you're an all-time great.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there were two, like this year, Joe Thomas and Darrelle Revis, both first-timers. Obviously players like Brady are going to be on the first ballot. I mean, I can go down the list. There's usually two every year, one or two, minimum of one. When you look at who becomes eligible that year, you can say, well, it basically leaves three spots open. I remember, I can't remember who they were, but I remember the first year Dawkins was eligible. I looked and said it's going to be tough because of some guys that are automatics.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people would consider him an automatic, but he got in his second year when
I honestly, Damo, I was surprised how quickly he got in, because I got to know, when I was in Minnesota, I got to know Paul Krause, and I know what he went through as the all-time interception leader. Took him, I don't know, 20 years to get in the Hall of Fame, because safeties, not a lot of safeties, same as centers, not a lot of safeties in the Hall of Fame. I thought it was going to take Brian a little bit, to be honest. So I was surprised how quickly he got in.
The first year, John, he was, if you recall, John Lynch was also eligible about the same time. Now, in my mind, I mean, there's no comparison between John Lynch and Brian Dawkins. I mean, John Lynch was a great cover two safety, belonged in the Hall of Fame and did good in, but could not do the things Brian Dawkins did for Jimmy Johnson in Jim's defense. But there was this, that took some votes away, because nobody was going to put two safeties in at the same time that year. The second year, I think what put him over the top, besides the fact that people just came to realize that how good Dawkins was Bill Belichick said something. I forget who brought it into the room, but I mean, Bill Belichick basically said, "This is absurd."
He carries some weight. Yeah.
And I'm sure that a lot of people said, "Well, Bill says that." That put me over the top. So I think that helped. So sometimes you just never know what's going to change votes.
And if the right guy gets behind you,
last Hall of Fame question, then we'll get into actual 2023 football. If you know off the top of your head, tough question, sorry for posing it to you. Has any safety ever made it in first ballot?
I mean, I'd have to go way back. Maybe
did Ronnie make it first year? Ronnie Lott.
Ronnie was a safety / corner, right? He played both.
But he made mainly safety though.
That probably, there probably are a couple. A lot, most notably, most recently,
Did Palomano get in first ballot? I don't remember. I should remember.
I can't remember.
All right, never mind. Sorry, just me being inquisitive and foolish. Sorry about that.
Speaking of future Hall of Famers, Calais Ringo assigned. Damo, were you concerned? I got
save that clip, Xander. We'll be playing that one back for years to come.
I'm joking. I get every year, Damo. I tell fans there's always one guy. It's usually a second rounder or fourth rounder that kind of trickles, because there's a little bit of wiggle room. There's no holdouts anymore. There was Joey Bosa. That was about it. I don't know. But every year, everybody worries. Why isn't Ringo signed? Why isn't Ringo signed? Because everybody's on vacation. Now they're back. They signed him. That's pretty much the exact. That's the reason.
Yeah.
Long term, though, I do think one of the more interesting parts of the offseason, and we only got to watch this team for 100 minutes. I talk about it all the time. They moved Zach McPherson inside. Avonte Maddox wasn't ready, wasn't cleared from offseason surgery. They put him in the slot because they have all these bodies on the outside. You want Slay, you want Bradbury to be healthy, but they were both healthy, completely healthy for all 20 games last year. Odds of that happening again, I don't know. Cross your fingers, but it's nice to have some depth. Between Calais Ringo and Greedy Williams and Josh Jobe and Eli Ricks, even the undrafted kids, Mekhi Gardner, they got a bunch of bodies at outside corner. I think they're better set up. And I think Zach is more natural in the slot. I think that was sort of an underreported upgrade. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and also, I mean, another reason they might have done it, I don't know what's going to end up happening with Maddox because of the difficulty with injuries, but he's a guy you could slide back to safety. I mean, I always thought that was going to be his best position. Although safety and corner, in all these defenses anymore are so interchangeable that it doesn't matter. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the corner position inside and outside is one of the things that concerns me about this defense, not because of the lack of talent, just because of the lack of depth and lack of proven depth. That if they have some injuries there, in a league where quarterbacks can pick you apart very easily, even in the NFC where the caliber of quarterback isn't quite as good as the AFC, you got to stay healthy or you're going to be in trouble. So, but yeah, I mean, McPherson came from the Big 12, which was hardly an outside corner.
No. It's a defensive juggernaut, that conference as a whole.
Yeah, and he can tackle. I think he's got the quickness to play inside, which, you've got to have that change of direction to play slot corner, which you don't need as much on the outside where speed is kind of a bigger concern. So, yeah, I mean, I like the move. We'll see what happens.
All right, Damo, I lied. I'm dragging you right back into the Hall of Fame discussion. Running backs getting into the Hall of Fame. They've been few and far between the last decade. Not none. LaDainian Tomlinson got in. Edge got in. Bettis got in. But not a lot either. And the league is certainly trending in a specific running back direction. We've been debating the finances of it because of what happened in the league yesterday. Guys not getting long-term deals, having to play on franchise tags. What kind of an effect is the way the running back is viewed in the NFL by the teams of the NFL? What kind of effect is going to have on you guys when you got to decide who is or isn't the Hall of Famer as a former running back?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot, Jody, because you're not seeing the numbers that you used to see in the league from running backs, either yards or carries. I mean, you're not seeing many 300 carry guys anymore. You're not seeing, you're not going to see many guys who are going to have career rushing yard totals because of the fact that teams have, I mean, look at the Eagles. They're basically going to be a by committee rushing team. Not only that, but their quarterback is rushing for most of the yards. So you're just not going to have guys that are going to have a rushing total you're going to look at and say, hey, he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, Derrick Henry I forget where he was in that list that we ran on the 33rd team. I had him as potentially, because I think his best years are behind him, and he still needs 2 or 3 really great years to get in the conversation. So, Shady McCoy's probably going to be, when he becomes eligible in a few years, is a guy you got to at least think about, but not right away. I mean, I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to make the final 15 for a while, but you're right. You're not going to see very many running backs down the road here when guys, careers are over and they wait their 5 years that are going to be guys you seriously think about putting in the Hall of Fame.
How quick do you think Peterson goes in, and did the end of his career hurt him a little bit, sort of bouncing around at the end, trying to hang on?
In my mind, John, he's one of those first-year guys. At least that's the way I had him. I think he's eligible when 26, maybe. Yeah. 25. No, 26.
Yeah, I would think he'd go right in, but you never know. When you hang on, people, the last sort of thought people have, and
I'll tell you what though, the group in the I kind of have a lot of respect for most of our voters, and they tend to look at the big picture rather than isolate on whether a guy hung on too long. A guy like Montana. Well, I mean, that was a no-brainer, but I don't think it'll hurt Peterson. I mean, I think the body of his work will allow him to be a first-year guy.
Damo, Eagles open up camp next Tuesday. They are the favorite to win the NFC this year. I think so. Vegas thinks so. Your betting outlets certainly make them the favorite. But we also know the numbers that in the history of the Super Bowl, only 3 teams that went to the Super Bowl and lost came back and the following year won it. The Patriots did it a couple of years. The team lost. The Eagles came back, won the next year, beat the Rams. But prior to that, you got to go back 45, 50 years to find a team, the Cowboys and the Dolphins, who did it back in the 70s. Why is it so difficult for a team that goes to the Super Bowl and loses to be able to get over that hump and win that final game the next season?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did a story on this maybe a year and a half ago. With Tony Dungy was talking about all the things that the problems that are created by making the Super Bowl, whether you won or lost, because there haven't been many that have repeated. I mean, you're playing so late that it's difficult to recover. I mean, that's one reason. You've got a target on your back. I mean, everybody's going to be shooting for the Eagles this year. You've got. I think also there's a mental thing where, you made it. The next year, it's like everything. You expect to be back there, and so you kind of look over opponents, and you're not playing it. You hear coaches talk all the time about playing it 1 week at a time, one game at a time. I think when you've made the Super Bowl the following year, that's harder to do because you're just looking ahead to, okay, let's get back to the playoffs and start there. All we got to do is, get to that point. And that's why you not only don't see very many teams that lost in the Super Bowl get back to the Super Bowl. There are, I want to say, when I did a survey or did the numbers the year I did the story, half the teams that lost in the Super Bowl didn't even make the playoffs the following year, or slightly less. Yeah. And I think that's a big reason why they're just not mentally as sharp, because they're, it's like they put everything on hold until they get to the playoffs.
Yeah. The mental hurdle's big. We remember coming off the Super Bowl win, Damo. Remember, Malcolm wanted to take that sign down from the locker room when they started to struggle early, and that was after winning. And then you mentioned the length of the season. I was struck. I was at Milton Williams and Zach McPherson had a youth camp in South Jersey, so I went to check it out. And these are young guys. And in the case for Milton's a defensive tackle, obviously, but he's in good shape for a defensive tackle. Very young guy. McPherson's in unbelievable shape at all times. And they were both saying, they're very young guys saying, man, it's quick. Playing that long and trying to get back in the grind. Players keep telling me that playing that long is a big deal. Now, the Patriots did it. The Chiefs are doing it pretty consistently. So maybe that's a mental hurdle as well, but it's certainly in their minds. I can tell you that. That's a big part of it. And it's a concern, but I will say this, Damo. Boy, the NFC stinks. I mean, if the Eagles were in the AFC, I'd say no shot they're getting back. None. Zero. None. In the NFC, I think they can have struggles, and I think they will have struggles, and I think they'll be able to recover and make a run, because who else is going to do it? You got San Francisco and Dallas. That's it.
My biggest, I agree with you, John. The one concern I would have, and it's not a concern because there's no reason to think it's going to happen, but injuries. They were remarkably healthy last year, especially their offensive line. 2 games missed to injury by their starters, and that just doesn't happen. You go back to 2020 with the Eagles when everything fell apart, that 4-11-1 year. Their starting offensive line missed 40 games. You just can't. Can you count on being healthy 2 years in a row? Sure, But does it happen a lot? No. I mean, usually, for no reason that you can ever explain, a team that was, didn't have a hangnail one year, the next year, can't take two steps without pulling a hamstring or tearing an ACL or something. So that would be that's the only thing I think that's going to stop the Eagles from getting back to the Super Bowl.
John mentioned the NFC, Eagles, 49ers, Cowboys, and then a drop-off. I'm not near as high on the Cowboys as everybody else is. I think it's Eagles and 49ers, then the drop-off, then the Cowboys and the Seahawks and the other teams. And I think Seattle could be just as good as Dallas is. Here's my biggest concern about Dallas. Tell me if I'm just like whistling at the wind here and maybe from an Eagle perspective, wishful thinking. I got no bloody idea what kind of play caller that Mike McCarthy is going to be for Dak Prescott. He did it for years in Green Bay. Had a pretty good quarterback he was calling the plays for, Mr. Rodgers, so you expect lifted the offense with his abilities, at least some. What kind of play caller do you think McCarthy's going to be in Dallas?
You talk to people around the league, Jody. I mean, there's mixed opinions about McCarthy, both as a head coach and a play caller. So I don't know. I think more of it comes down to what kind of quarterback Dak Prescott's going to be than what kind of play caller McCarthy's going to be. I don't think last year was the real Dak Prescott. I think he'll cut down on the interceptions this year. I'm sure he's very
guaranteed yesterday he's not going to throw 10. He's going to be in single digits. He promised Paul Domowitch no 15 interceptions with games missed this year. You buying it?
Yeah. I think he'll be, like I said, I think he'll be a better quarterback. They picked up Brandon Cooks, which is going to help that receiving core. They've improved their defense in spots that needed to be improved. So I think they're a better team. Are they as good as the Eagles? No. But I think they'll probably split the season series, and we'll see what happens after that.
By the way, Dom, it's amazing to me. It's like back in the day, if you threw 10 interceptions, you were taking care of the football. You were phenomenal. Now, if you throw 10, you're the worst quarterback in the history of the world. Not, obviously Dak was above that, but it's amazing. And that was Jalen Hurts. He took care of the football. That's why you can't predict anything in this league. Nobody took care of the football better than Jalen Hurts last year. And then unforced error in the Super Bowl that cost you. I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong at big spots and big times, but the consistency of it, I do think Dak's going to have a bounce back year because statistically, he's not turned the ball over a ton throughout his career, and it's probably an outlier. Are people in Philadelphia dismissing the Cowboys because it's the Cowboys and they just don't like the Cowboys? I think it's a good football team.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they and the fact that their history. I mean, year in and year out, they seem to have, at this point in time, we talk about them being a Super Bowl contender, and then something always happens. I mean, that causes them to come up short. Even when they make the playoffs, something bad happens to them. So that and the fact that everybody in Philadelphia hates the Cowboys, I think, contributes to that.
Yeah, but John used the word dismissed. I don't believe I'm dismissing the Cowboys. I think they're going to be a playoff team. I just don't think they're winning the NFC East, and I think there will be some other team that jumps up and is the third best team over the Cowboys. I got them like fourth or fifth. Does that qualify as dismissing the Cowboys?
No, I wasn't talking about just you, Jody.
I understand that, but I'm just asking, would I be one of those that would be considered as dismissing the Cowboys?
No, I mean, you know how many times you hear people just say, Cowboys stink. Okay, right. I mean, I agree. I agree. The Cowboys are a very good team. I think Dak's going to be a better quarterback, and I think it's a team you're going to have to contend with. Like I said, I think they'll probably split the series with the Eagles. I just think when push comes to shove at the end, the Eagles will be on top.
I think it's interesting because Andy's philosophy, was be consistently good. And, one of those years, the star's going to align. And if you make the playoffs, You know, I go back to that San Francisco game. Now they didn't finish it, but they almost finished it when they lost to Kansas City. You remember when they beat Green Bay? They were completely dominated in a bad weather game. So it was close, and all of a sudden you have the block punt, and then they win the game. They're in the Super Bowl, and they had no right being there. And oh, by the way, they outplayed the Chiefs for 3 quarters and almost won the Super Bowl. Had no business being there. If you're consistently good, you know, the stars are going to align. You keep it getting back to the playoffs, getting back to the playoffs, getting back to the playoffs. You're going to get that run eventually. Now, Andy didn't get it till he got Patrick Mahomes, so that helped. But he was there a lot. I'd rather be there than not be there is what I'm trying to say, which is common sense, but I think people dismiss because I think we've gotten into this. If you don't win the championship, it's a failure. And it's really hard to make the playoffs. And if you make the playoffs consistently, you're probably pretty good.
Well, you know, the Eagles' whole approach going back to the Andy Reid era, it was always
that's what I'm saying.
Sustainability.
Just
stay in the hunt year after year, as long as you can, as opposed to a lot of clubs that kind of went for it, you know, in the window of opportunity, and then watch it close and rebuild. I mean, they tried to stay good for a long time with the hopes that one of those years they would win a Super Bowl. You know, it took a while, but, you know, eventually it did happen.
Yeah.
All right, Damo, this my last question, and I know it's right in your wheelhouse. A.J. Brown got a 91 rating on Madden, making him the 8th highest wide receiver in the league this year. Is he being disrespected?
Based on his performance last year, yes. And the quarterback who's throwing to him, you know, I'm going to be interested to, yes, I would say yes, Jody, but I do want to see how teams defend him this year. You know, that's every year the big difference when a team is successful is, you know, coaches have had an entire offseason to game plan and to figure out ways to defend you the next year. And that's, you know, that's going to be that's what I'm most curious to see this year as to how teams change their approach to the Eagles offense.
Yeah. But by the way, going back to our original question from Jody, is Deshaun Jackson a Hall of Fame receiver? Now, A.J. Brown is very young. He's got a long way to go, but he's got the template to be a Hall of Fame receiver. PFF had him the #1 slant receiver in football and the #2 receiver on go routes in football. In other words, he can beat you every single which way. He can beat you short. He can beat you intermediate. He can beat you with the deep ball. Again, he's only played 4 seasons. He's got a long way to go. But those are Hall of Fame guys who can do everything. Not the, all right, he can run by a bunch of people. Even though he ran by people better than anybody else, I think AJ is a perfect example of a well-rounded top-tier receiver in the NFL.
Absolutely.
And hopefully Dom will be the guy who's making the argument. It's not going to be for another
15
years.
It's going to be a while.
Dom will be hanging in there as the representative of Philadelphia. He represents well. He represents well every time he comes on with us here on Birds 365. And we thank him for doing it again today. Damo, next time we get you on, it'll be to talk about what the Eagles are actually doing on the field.
Oh,
novel
nice
concept, seeing as we haven't seen it for 6 months.
Well, you know, not necessarily, Jody, because it is the Eagles in training camp, so they don't do much. So, you know,
something is better than nothing, even if it's calisthenics. How did AJ look doing those jumping jacks? That'll be the questions I'll be putting to you and Damo and anybody else who gets down there. Damo, always a pleasure, buddy. Thanks for coming on. We'll get back with you very soon.
Thanks, Damo.
Take care.
You can read him at the 33rdteam.com, also in season with JAKIBsports.com, and the Hall of Fame representative for Philadelphia, Paul Damo. I'm sorry. Johnny and I are both old school. And we like Hall of Fame conversations.
Yeah,
We've
do.
been watching the National Football League for a long time between the two of us. So when we get a guy like Clark Judge on, we get a guy like Paul Domowitch on, and they're in the room to decide who gets the NFL's greatest honor. Yeah, we kind of like tapping into their expertise. All right, McMullen and McDonald coming back. Oh, I know what question. I'm going to ask McMullen when I come back. Oh, it's A.J. Brown related. Since I went Madden on A.J. Brown, I'm going to go PFF to Johnny Mac. A.J. Brown related when we come back here on Birds 365.